Good morning, Wabash. Today, speaking at Pioneer Chapel, is Franklin Russel, Kaleb Wood, and Nathan Gray. This talk is one of the 2 Mental Health Day of discussion events this fall. The goal of this talk is to promote dialogue and normalization of mental health challenges. Frank is a senior political science major from Findlay, Ohio. He is president of the Independent Men's Association and a member of the Sphinx Club. Kaleb is a junior majoring in psychology and living in Wolcott Hall. He currently serves as the vice president for both the International Students Association and Circle K, treasurer for the Pep Band and Extreme Sports Club, and is a sender for the class of 2021. Last summer, Kaleb interned with the nonprofit Hope for the Day and now serves as an agent of impact, focusing on proactive suicide prevention and mental health education. Nathan is a senior political science major with minors in chemistry and Spanish. Born in Indianapolis, Nathan is a brother of Beta Theta Pi and has served in a number of roles on campus, including as student body vice president and a sender for the class of 2020. Currently, he is a senior fellow with the Wabash Democracy and Public Discourse Initiative and works for a civil rights attorney in town. Following graduation, Nathan hopes to pursue a career at the intersection of data, communication, and policy. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Good morning, Wabash.
Good morning, Frank.
The first thing I'd like to do is thank my parents, teammates, friends, family, and Work Crew 17 for helping me be here today. The point of this talk is to break down the stigma surrounding mental illness discussion. For those of you that don't know me, I'm not an emotional guy. Really not that big into accessing my emotions, talking about any of that kind of stuff. So maybe shocking to see me up here. That's the point of this talk, to break down that stigma and to help you guys be able to discuss it with one another when you guys are by yourselves. Today, I'll talk about the toughest challenge I have ever faced. It was my sophomore year. I had just come back from a summer at the Philmont Scout Ranch. I had just gotten off the plane in Ohio at 10 p.m. and was on campus by 11 a.m. the next morning. Before I came home, I made the decision to break up with my girlfriend of 2 years. I did so shortly after arriving back in the Midwest. The first few weeks of school went fine. I was surviving my classes, except for German, and was getting ready for another year of wrestling. My ex and I were still talking regularly, and while we were broken up in name, we were far from emotionally separated. It was during this time that I began to drink. I'd never had a sip of alcohol before, and I thought it would be a good idea to use it as a coping mechanism. As wrestling season started, my shoulder began to feel off. I went to see the trainers, and we began to work on it. At the first tournament, I tore my rotator cuff and labrum. Shortly after this, my ex began to separate herself from me. My downward spiral began to slide faster. I was losing my best friend, and I was unable to process my emotions how I normally would, by working out. My shoulder needed surgery, and my ex continued to separate. After surgery, I was in a sling for several months, unable to jog, and was forced to sit around with my thoughts, the worst prison I could imagine, the constant guilt weighing down on me of my actions. I became that toxic person we all strive not to be. I broke the gentleman's rule just about every time I talked to her and continued down my road of self-pity. I felt alone and isolated. Eventually, I made it out of the sling and decided to get more involved on campus. I applied for and got into Rhineship. As many of you know, this is a mentally challenging time. I struggled a lot. I had buried my emotions deep down and preferred to distract myself with other things rather than confront my own demons. My Ryan brothers, although they did not know, were the helpful, supportive family I needed then, but I was not improving. I stayed at a constant level of self-pity. Although I experienced joy in my times with them, when I was by myself, I would quickly get depressed. I was not competing in wrestling that year, so I was able to drink during what would have been season. I continued my method of coping, at the bottom of a bottle with my best friend, Jack. The mixture of alcohol and self-pity did not work out well for me. I became more toxic towards her and those around me. Eventually, she blocked me on everything. I do not blame her. I would have done the same thing. The lowest point for me came when I saw on a mutual friend's Instagram story she had a new boyfriend. That night, I smashed a picture I had of us, cutting myself on some glass in the process, and stormed out into the winter night without a jacket and in shorts. My roommate then and now came out to me, put a jacket around my shoulders, and hugged me as I cried. He told me it was time to get help. The next morning, I went into the trainer's room, and Erin O'Connor sat me down as I cried again. She contacted the counseling center and helped me set up an appointment. I began to get the help I needed. I continued through Rhineship with my academic responsibilities and seeing the counselors twice a week. The regularity was nice, and it was around that time I was able to start working out again, and I got hired to go back to Philmont. I thought I was looking pretty good. I was busy, working out, and counting down the days until I could go back. I worked every day to improve my mental health. I saw the counselors regularly, and my roommate went to the gym with me. I still experienced episodes of heavy drinking after thinking about her, but those were minor blips, I thought. I left for the summer feeling better and excited to begin my adventures at Philmont. I did not realize that I had merely buried how I felt, and the blips were my emotions coming to the surface. I've been looking forward to Philmont all year, counting down the days until I could sit on the mountainside with my feet over a 1,000-foot drop and feel free. During my training trek, a wildfire broke out. The Ute Park fire destroyed places that were held sacred to me for many years and destroyed the natural beauty of the place. That night, as we were evacuated and sitting 30 miles away watching the smoke rise, I sat in my mentor's tent and cried. I had re-entered my hole of self-pity. My mentor, Samantha Pentecost, didn't leave me. She sat there for hours, talking with me and listening, sometimes going a while without saying a word. Her presence meant the most. Every day after, she asked how I was doing and helped me to improve. Eventually, the work orders came in, and we were sent into the backcountry to cut down trees, to create shaded cover breaks, and to create a healthier forest and evacuation routes. I had work worth doing that would distract me from how I felt. I was placed into Work Crew 17, and we became another family. We sat together at night, laughing, crying, and talking, all over a game of euchre. I thought I was better and clear of the guilt I felt after the breakup. I was wrong. I still felt it at night in my tent alone after a hard work day. I still felt it on the weekends when we were free to go to cold beer and drink. It was over those 3 months of an 8-hour workday, cutting down trees, and talking at night that I actually improved the most. My work crew out there understood my struggles and did not grow tired of being with me or talking with me about them. My brothers here do not know my struggles. I faced because I did not want them to think less of me, but they still help by bringing joy and a sense of family into my life. Without them, I do not know where I would be today. Unfortunately, overcoming mental illness is not as easy as healing a physical injury. I rehab my shoulder every day, and I was cleared for athletic competition within the time frame they set from the beginning. There is never a time frame for returning to normal when mental health illness is involved. Some days are better than others. For me, I occasionally went several days without feeling depressed. When I did mess up and slip into a rough patch, my brothers were there to pick me up and ask, "How are you?" Or quite simply, "You good?" We are a brotherhood here, united by our mutual love and dedication to this college. Within this family, we all have smaller groups, such as sports teams, fraternities, clubs, or my personal favorite, the bond that happens between freshmen in College Hall. Students are not the only members of this family. Faculty and staff are there to help. Erin O'Connor, Mama Tammy and Sparks, and Professor Phillips are all examples of staff members that are here to support us both academically and emotionally. Lastly, do not forget the power of a hand on the shoulder or a simple smile can have. We are a brotherhood here. Thank you. Wabash always fights.
Morning, Wabash. Before I begin, I would first like to say thank you the Mental Health Concerns Committee and the Public Health Organization for organizing this event, as well as the Sphinx Club, and allowing me to have a platform to talk to all of you about something I care so deeply about. And thank you, of course, to you all. Without you, we would not have a conversation on mental health. You guys are the ones moving it forward. My interest in mental health came out of a place of care for my friends, and quite honestly, out of a place of fear. In high school, I had a couple friends going through their own mental health struggles, both attempting suicide, one once and one twice. And I, as their friend, wanted nothing but to help. But how could I? Just an ordinary guy, not a professional mental health expert, no degree in psychology. Where do I even start? I was afraid that I was failing as a friend by not being there in their time of need. You may think, just as I did, that mental health is too complicated or tricky of a topic for you to approach. But my experience with Hope for the Day has taught me otherwise, reshaping the way that I view mental health. I would like to share with you what I've learned, and I hope to demonstrate that each and every one of you, no matter your experiences, can start the conversation on mental health. That word conversation is particularly important because according to the World Health Organization, other than any other factor, stigma and silence are the biggest obstacles to suicide prevention. Again, the biggest obstacle from keeping those from seeking help is silence. One stigma you've likely all heard growing up, the phrase "boys don't cry," is a perfect example of how stigma can lead to silence on mental health. Crying is completely natural, just an expression of an emotion. Yet, as men, we're told we can't get emotional. We need to be tough, no matter what. And what do you do if you let your emotions slip, if you cry? Well, society says it's because you're less of a man. These stigmas try to dictate how we feel and how we express ourselves, whether we recognize it or not. Stigmas lead to deep fears about being judged and feelings of shame about mental health challenges because you're seen as not normal. In order to break down stigma, we must first understand that mental health challenges are completely natural. They're biological in nature and are nothing to be ashamed of. Everyone has their bad days, and taking care of our mental health is about being honest and open with one another. There's no shame in seeking help, and it's okay not to be okay. Taking care of your mental health is just as important as supporting others. Like oxygen masks on a plane, you can't help others if you don't help yourself first. A great analogy for understanding mental health and how you can be mentally healthy is that of the soda bottle. It's an analogy that I learned over the summer, and it has really helped me think about how mental health affects all of us, whether we know it or not. I'd like you all to think of your mind like a bottle of soda. Now imagine you shake that bottle up, pressure's building and building and building. If you don't open that cap, then the bottle's gonna hit maximum pressure, could end up in a big mess. Experiences from all aspects of life shake the bottle and build pressure. If we don't find healthy ways to release this, it could severely impact our mental health in negative ways. However, even when there's high pressure, we can still relieve the pressure by opening the bottle slowly in a controlled manner. The ways in which we relieve our pressure are called valves, and anything that you do that you enjoy or makes you feel good is an example of a valve. Say, for example, you just finished taking a difficult exam, you stressed all night for this exam, studying and working hard. You may choose to valve up the built-up pressure from this experience by maybe working out or watching a movie, something that you enjoy that relieves stress for you. Even just talking to a friend can be a great valve. Being proactive about your mental health means using these values to manage the pressures of life, especially here at Wabash. We pride ourselves constantly on challenging ourselves, pushing our limits. But without valves, that is the only way that we can stay mentally healthy. Valves also serve as an early detection mechanism for mental health challenges, allowing us to take a proactive approach in mental health the same way that we approach our physical health. If we utilize our valves, but the pressure doesn't seem to go away, then that's the first sign. Maybe we need to get some more help. Just like at the first signs of the flu, you don't wait until you're throwing up, can't get out of bed, a fever of 103 to get proper medical treatment. You take steps to limit the effects of the flu and reduce its negative impact on your health. Recognizing when your valves are unable to release the built-up pressure allows us to seek additional help long before a point of crisis arises. And this is where it is so important that we see mental health as physical health, taking preventative measures and recognizing that our mental health is equally as important and there are avenues to seek help long before any sort of crisis arises. But that's how you can be proactive on your own mental health. How can you be supportive of others? Well, many of you likely have been in the position that I described at the beginning of this talk, as someone looking to help a friend in need, but unsure how to actually do so. As a Wabash gentleman, it's our responsibility to look out for one another as friends and as brothers. The number one way to be supportive of someone when having a conversation on mental health is to listen. Now, this may sound like a given, but to truly listen is much easier said than done. Those of you who know me know that I really like to talk about anything and everything. I could go on for hours. Learning how to listen, really listen, was difficult for me. It means letting someone express themselves fully without interrupting them or shifting the focus to yourself, even if you have maybe a point or a similar experience that you would like to share. The second is to be non-judgmental. You may not fully understand what someone's going through, but that's okay. Everyone's experiences are unique. There is also an important point and a little thing that you can think of next time you're having a conversation with somebody, and that's asking what questions rather than why questions. Even if you don't intend to be judgmental, the tone of a why question, why do you think that? It's much more stigmatizing than what makes you think that. The person then has to justify themselves to you and justify their emotions when we already know that it's completely natural and okay. The third is being a teammate and support. It's important to note that being a teammate doesn't mean that it's your job to diagnose someone or to tell them what to do. Just like in football, the coach calls the plays. But you can be a source of encouragement and even act as a bridge to connect someone with mental health resources. This could include the counseling center or one of the many call or text hotlines where people can seek the additional support that they might need. Overall, there has been much progress made in destigmatizing mental health, but too many individuals continue to struggle in silence. Too many experience mental health challenges, but feelings of shame and guilt, fears of being judged, and other stigmatizing attitudes keep them from speaking out, even on this campus, even in our Wabash community. But you don't need to be an expert on mental health to help break the silence and support your brothers. If we understand that mental health challenges are nothing to be ashamed of and break down that first wall, we can then compel others to speak up as well by being proactive and beginning the conversation on our mental health, not waiting until it negatively affects us. We're actively resisting stigma. Finally, we begin truly loving and caring for both ourselves and others by understanding the important phrase, "It's okay not to be okay." Thank you.
Good morning, Wabash. First, like Frank and Caleb, I'd like to begin with some thank yous. Thank you to the dedicated organizations, faculty, staff, and students who push for these types of conversations on campus and to continue to ensure that dialogues like these occur. Next, I too have to thank everyone whose support has gotten me here today. Finally, I thank all of you for being here and for listening to our stories. I will note that there was not a great deal of collaboration between the speakers in preparing today's speeches, so since Caleb touched on a lot of the things that my story reveals, consider me perhaps a case study in many of the points he talked about. My story begins pretty early. In the second grade, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and because I'm a real go-getter, I also picked up diagnoses of mild anxiety and depression. Luckily, these last two diagnoses were really offshoots from my untreated ADHD. and for much of my life, treating my ADHD has been enough to keep these other issues in check. However, there are still times when my anxiety and depression flare. Sometimes these flare-ups are minor and brief. On occasion, they are harder to shake off, stretching for days or for weeks. They have been caused by stressful events, including big assignments or tests, the loss of loved ones, or times of intense life changes, such as, I don't know, preparing to graduate. Other times, there is no obvious cause for why I hit a rough patch. And my resources haven't always been the same in each instance. Sometimes all I need is a quick talk with a friend, a surprise text from my mom, but other times, I may need to seek help from a professional. After much trial and much more error, I have learned a number of tools to help me to better recognize when my mental health is being challenged or when I am failing to address the stress in my life in a healthy and timely way. The most important of these tools, and the one I believe we can all benefit from using, is simply to talk about it. To be clear, I don't think the goal is simply to normalize conversations about mental health generally, but instead to normalize conversations about my own mental health and about each of yours. I am amazed at how often the problems that seem like mountains in my mind look like molehills when I said them out loud. When we share our own experiences, I often find we make them far more manageable to deal with. And this approach can serve everyone, regardless of their current mental health status, and no matter if you talk to a friend, a mentor, or a professional. For those who struggle, it can provide the network and strategies for support to make progress. For those who aren't currently struggling, it acts like insurance, setting in place the people and skills that allow us to cope with the challenges life throws at us. One of the best features of the Talk About It approach is that the more of us who use it, and the more frequently that we use it, the more effective it becomes. When we speak about our own mental health, we signal to others that it is normal to talk about these experiences, and more importantly, that it is okay to seek support. When we listen to someone share their own mental health story, we recognize their struggle and validate their experience. Every time we speak out, and every time we make someone feel heard, we make it easier for others and for ourselves to step forward and to seek help when we need it. And there is benefit in learning from each other's journeys. Beyond my own mental health experience, I've witnessed friends, families, and complete strangers deal with a whole gambit of struggles: depression, grief, addiction, or anything else. What I have learned is that all of our experiences are unique. No two of us will face the same challenges, none of us will experience identical stressors, and even if we did, no two of us would respond in the same ways. Realizing this helped me let go of a lot of unhealthy expectations for myself and others when it came to talking about and addressing mental health issues. I no longer expect the same situation to affect me the same way it impacts someone else. And I don't beat myself up when the way I deal with a stressor or a mental health struggle doesn't match the techniques or the timeline that work for another. It has also helped me to be a more compassionate listener and effective supporter for my friends who struggle. As Kaleb mentions, our experiences are all different, they're all unique. The kinds of problems we face, whether they be acute, whether they're chronic, whether they're fleeting or lasting, means that maybe some of the things that worked for myself may not work for you. And it is important to remember that when we have these conversations, that they are open, that they are dialogues and not lectures, that we make room for others and make room for ourselves to share our own experiences. 8 years ago, looking to get involved as a freshman in high school, I joined the speech and debate team. Don't get your expectations up for the rest of the speech based on that, by the way. That year, I competed with an original speech about mental illness. In it, I promoted greater awareness of the prevalence of mental illness and advocated to normalize discussions of mental health. Every time I gave that speech, a knot of nervous terror would tighten in my chest. I knew from my own experience that this topic was important, that more conversations about mental health were critical to reducing the stigma and improving the lives of those who struggle. But it was difficult to admit that I experienced these issues. It was hard to escape a sense of shame and guilt that came from admitting my struggles with mental health. Standing here 8 years later, I have to admit that that knot in my chest is not entirely gone. To be sure, it's easier for me to talk about these things today than it used to be. But to remove a stigma, to change the culture surrounding mental health, will require time and commitment. A commitment that requires each of us to not only make space for others to seek support, but gives ourselves that same freedom. I agreed to speak today not only to confirm for all of you that it's okay to struggle and to speak about it, but also to confirm that for myself. No matter where you are in your mental health journey right now, there is benefit in talking about where you are at. I recognize that what I ask requires the courage to make oneself vulnerable, but believe me, it is worth it. Together, we can work to actively change the culture on this campus and outside of it that surrounds mental health and mental health challenges. We can shift the conversation to a frame of proactive movement and proactive support for one another's needs and for the challenges that we in some way all face during the course of our lives. But on an ending note, the success of this approach requires that it continues. The success of our talks here today, of sharing our stories, only continues if we have encouraged or succeeded in convincing you to share your own or to listen to others. As we leave this chapel today, I encourage you to ensure and to be cognizant in your daily lives of the actions and statements you make and how they shape an environment or culture for coming forward with these struggles or otherwise, and to always ensure that you're providing space for these conversations to continue. Thank you.